Hi, this is Madison Griffin, and I am presenting tiny houses, their place in a secure energy future. On this slide, I have a tiny house from Boise, Idaho. Thought I'd include that in there. And a quote from Blueprint from a Secure Energy Future from President Obama. Making our buildings more energy efficient is one of the fastest, easiest, and cheapest ways to save money, combat pollution, and create jobs right here in the United States of America. And that's what we're going to do. I thought I would start by giving a bit of a summary of the section of Blueprint for a Secure Energy Future that I am critiquing. The section is cut energy bills with more efficient homes and buildings. The challenge, according to the blueprint, is that our buildings, which all includes homes, factories, and businesses, are responsible for over 70% of our total energy consumption, and that there's no one size fits all solution in order to solve becoming more energy efficient. Um, and my focus is in the residential sector. It does summarize current efforts, which have focused on local and community initiatives, and as well as individual ones, such as rebates for energy efficient appliances. Efforts have been made to update low income and rural residential housing. So, the Weatherization Assistance Program, for instance, has weatherized 350,000 residences to reduce the burden of utility costs on residents. And the Rural Energy for America program has helped 4,000 rural residents and small businesses save enough energy to power 390,000 homes through renewable energy installs and energy efficient appliances. And moving forward, um, efforts will be focusing on including rebates and incentives directly to the consumers to upgrade their homes with energy efficient appliances. I do have some critiques for the section right off the bat. Um, One is that houses since the Great Recession have been getting bigger and consume more energy even when they are well built. So that's something that's not addressed. There's an increasing number of people who do rent instead of owning their home, and that's partly because they can't afford these bigger homes. Um, and I do appreciate empowering the consumer, but there should be some incentives for community or businesses to promote these. So, one of the issues is that American homes are becoming bigger and bigger. 2016 marks the lowest rate of home ownership we've seen in over 50 years. This is a challenge when you're trying to bring rebates directly to the consumer. If they don't own their home, they can't make those updates. So, after the Great Recession, land became increasingly scarce, land to build new homes on. Increases in land costs and construction costs drove builders to build larger homes on smaller lots. Because people in higher income brackets were more likely to have the income to buy new houses, builders built larger and larger houses. As a result, fewer and fewer smaller homes are available for families who are smaller or have smaller incomes. So today, the average size of a single family home is over 2,500 square feet compared to 40 years ago, which was around 1,600 square feet. But the interesting thing is that the yards of these larger homes are actually smaller. So there is actually a demand for modestly sized homes, but the price per square foot of these homes is much larger than its McMansion counterpart, um, because less people, less of these homes are being built. So there's more demand than there is supply of these. Millennials are one of the populations suffering from this trend. They are more likely to be single or childless. They are more likely to be renting. Only 34.1% of millennials are homeowners, according to the Wall Street Journal. So I thought this was a great way to put it. So I already told you the average size of the American home, but because our family sizes have become smaller within the same time period, the square footage per occupant really shows that difference in square footage. So today, most families budget 1,000 square feet per person, compared to 40 years ago, which was only 550 square feet per person. So there are some benefits of going with a smaller house, and the number one is reducing energy consumption and utility bills, and even in standard builds. This is a graphic from the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, and the blue house in the graph is just a house built to code without any energy efficient appliances. So a smaller home that is just built to code, like the one that's the smallest one they have, which is only, what is it, 700 something square feet, is actually as energy efficient as an extremely uh, advanced performance home that's closer to the average size of people's homes, which is like 2,200 square feet. So this is something that the blueprint doesn't keep in mind. It's giving rebates for energy efficient appliances, but if the square footage of the home is smaller, even if it's not energy efficient, it's producing less energy costs than that larger home. Another benefit is that people can live with smaller mortgages. These houses are more affordable, or they can even be debt free. Some people can actually afford to buy the home outright, which would definitely prevent another housing crash. You'd also, by spending less on the square footage of the home, you can actually spend that money, if you have it, elsewhere on the design, um, or to make the house more energy efficient as well. By going smaller, we could actually increase the number of Americans who do own their own homes, including millennials, which is the greatest number of renters at this point. And by providing incentives for the industry to build smaller homes, we would reduce the price of these sized homes, which are in short supply. And that brings me to the small house movement, sometimes called the tiny house movement. This has really been popping up since 2007 with the housing crash. People are increasingly looking for much smaller homes than the average home, so that they can buy their home outright or just have a smaller mortgage. Um, Wikipedia defines the small house movement as a social and architectural movement um, that advocates for downsizing into smaller, more energy efficient homes. And a lot of that has to do with minimalism or living more simply. I'm referring to this as the small house movement to be more inclusive because most tiny houses are considered to be under 500 square feet, and this has to do with the legality of them. They usually have to be on wheels, but to get around codes, and sometimes have to be certified as RVs, recreational vehicles. So I'm calling the small house movement to also be inclusive of houses that are under 1,000 square feet, which is smaller than the average size of houses, even from the 1970s, as we saw in a previous um, graph. There are some challenges for taking advantage of the small house movement in order to improve our energy consumption in residences. A big one is zoning. Zoning laws are inconsistent across the country and outdated, which makes living tiny less feasible and sometimes illegal. Another issue is building these houses to code. These codes aren't meant for these tiny dwellings. For instance, there's a rule about how close an electrical outlet can be to a sink, and sometimes rules like that are challenging to bring about in tiny dwellings because the fact that they're so tiny. Some tiny house builders have gotten around this by building them to RV codes, but there is some issues with that because in some states, houses that are classified as RVs can only be lived in part time. So that is a challenge, and sometimes they have to be in RV lots. They can't be on their own property. Another challenge, and to tell you the truth, this is the challenge with the entire blueprint, is that it's a little privileged. Um, so, for instance, the small house movement has really been more limited to people who are considered um, middle class or at least grew up that way because partly because they have the time to research these things or build their own houses in some cases, and in part because there is a lack of small house loans, and these are the sort of people who can actually finance these small homes outright. They have like $30,000 in their bank and they can do that. And this includes people even who save this up. A lot of people don't have the benefit of being able to save up that much money. So financing these small homes is extremely challenging because mortgages are meant for these larger and larger houses. Um, the average cost of a house, I think, right now is like over $290,000, and that's just really like the build. So, um, financing a house that costs less than $100,000 and often less than $60,000 is challenging in that market. Another issue, this one's not quite as big, but it has come up on the individual level, is that off grid and energy producing homes do actually face challenges with um, energy suppliers in the area, as well as city policies. So sometimes um, people basically are not allowed to produce their own energy or become off the grid based on city policies about these things. Oftentimes, these policies are actually meant to ensure that people have access to electricity and water, but it doesn't really account for the fact that people could produce these themselves with proper equipment. So, what is the future of the small house movement as it relates to the blueprint for a secure energy future? I think the best way to improve um, the resident section of this blueprint is to provide incentives for reducing energy use per person instead of just giving rebates for appliances. Um, Looking at energy use per person. So people could live in a larger house, for instance, if there are more people, um, because they'd still be like it wouldn't be 1,000 square feet per person. Um, but anyway, so these incentives um, would help allow for a variety of methods to be used to reduce energy use, including requiring stricter codes for energy efficiencies of newly built homes, um, as well as upgrading energy efficiency of larger homes, but also allowing for incentives for downsizing to the more modestly sized homes, which, even when built to code, are as energy efficient as the average size of the American home right now. We also need to look at updating zoning laws to reflect the needs of smaller, sometimes even one person households. A lot of millennials put off marriage, they're putting off having children, and they are looking to buy a home just to suit their needs. We also need to look at encouraging policies and zoning laws to have more consistency state to state and county to county. And this is to really reduce confusion for consumers and barriers for people seeking smaller residences. And until those sort of issues are solved, it's going to be difficult to take advantage of smaller spaces to reduce our energy consumption per person.